Please welcome the President and CEO of the Jewish Funders Network, Andrés Spokoiny.
Wow, that was something. We talk a lot about the Israelis that couldn't make it, but I want to just mention that there are a relatively big number of Israelis that actually did make it, and they did like amazing journeys to get here. So can we ask all the Israelis that travel here, like sometimes 30 hours, 40 hours, can we ask them to stand up and give them a round of applause? There you go. Amazing. Thank you for being here, and a special message for the JFN staff in Israel that is probably watching this via Zoom. We love you, we're with you, and we feel you with us. And yes, they deserve it. So, I'm not proud of it, but I have a habit that drives people crazy. That is, I leave stuff for the last minute. In fact, some of you know that I write my conference speech the night before the conference. Now, this year, I said to myself, no, I'm going to be a good boy, and I wrote my speech a month ago. It turns out I should have procrastinated. But then I was wondering, is the context today so different than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago? And in truth, the essence of what I wanted to share with you hasn't changed much. Because for many years now, we've been living in this permanent state of crisis and turmoil. It's like this famous poem from William Oden says, "Uncertain and afraid, as the clever hopes expire of a low, dishonest decade. The enlightenment driven away, the habit-forming pain, mismanagement and grief, we must suffer them all again." As the sirens blared in Israel, that last stanza of the Oden poem came back to me. Must we suffer it all again? And indeed, it sometimes feels like we are in a 1 in 100-year crisis every year. Now, and we can ask ourselves why this is happening, right? But at this point, this is merely academic. The most important question is, how do we live in these strange times in which destiny has placed us? And how, without falling into the tired cliche that every crisis is an opportunity, can we actually make something meaningful and transformative out of the convulsive times in which we live? Now, I don't have the answer, but I thought I would share with you 2 thinkers who give me the conceptual framework to think about our times. Both were Jewish, both escaped Nazi Germany, both knew uncertainty and fear, and both turned their experiences into powerful ideas about change, agency, and hope. The first is Kurt Lewin. Lewin is one of the founders of modern social psychology. His life of successive crises shaped the way in which he thought about change. His theory is brilliant because it's very simple. For him, change happens in 3 stages: freeze, unfreeze, refreeze. In freeze, institutions, habits, norms, and expectations tend to be very stable. And then change is hard. Sometimes it's even impossible because the range of opportunities and possibilities is very narrow. Many options actually appear virtually unthinkable. But then something happens. A crisis, a shock, a failure. The equilibrium breaks and the system unfreezes. Suddenly we discovered that what looked immutable was simply the way in which things were arranged. During the unfreeze, Trust erodes, institutions fail, authority weakens, and all methods stop working. Sound familiar? Now, in these moments, however, resistance to change drops dramatically. Not because we suddenly became wiser, but because the old order stopped working. And that is when the impossible begins to look possible. Because constraints, either institutional or psychological, weaken or disappear. And finally comes the refreeze. New patterns stabilize, there is a new normal, and the range of possibilities narrows again, sometimes even narrower than before. Think, for example, of the French Revolution. The old monarchy was the freeze. The revolution was the unfreeze. Everything seemed possible. But then came the Great Terror, the refreeze. Lewin's insight is this. If you want systemic change, the only times to do it is during the unfreeze. If you wait too long, reality freezes again and the window closes. Sometimes you don't need a brilliant idea. You simply need to leverage a moment when the forces resisting change have weakened. The second thinker is Albert Hirschman. He also lived an extraordinary life. He fought in the Spanish Civil War, he rescued Jews in Vichy France, and later he became one of the great thinkers of economic development. His main idea is something he called possibilism. Possibilism is the refusal to accept that nothing can be done. Hirschman noticed that whenever change is proposed, resistance tends to appear in three predictable forms. Futility, this won't change anything. Perversity, it will make things work. Jeopardy, it will risk what we already have. We hear these arguments all the effing time. But Hirschman believed that they were often, as we know, excuses. The idea that things are impossible generally comes from people who are trying to shut down debate, discourage experimentation, and protect their own power. Because the truth is, you rarely know what's really possible until you begin acting. That is the essence of his idea of possibilism. You don't need a perfect plan. The only thing you need is one plausible move. And then the action itself will expand the range of possibilities. The more you do, the more becomes possible. Now, I share this little lecture with you, not because I'm an intellectual snob that enjoys sounding professorial, although I am. We know each other. But I share these two thinkers because they capture the hidden promise of times like ours. We have been living inside that Auden poem for many years. I know that for many of us, I know for me, these last years were the most challenging of our lives. But they are also the very definition of Lewin's unfrozen times. Times when certainties collapse, when trust evaporates, when usual habits fail. Times in which we feel alone, endangered, and disoriented. And Lewin teaches us something crucial. These are the only moments when real systemic change is possible. But he also teaches something else, that the window is desperately short before change becomes exponentially harder. Now everything has been unfrozen, but we are already starting to see the signs of the refreeze, which means that there are things that are possible today that will not be possible a year from now. Lewin gives us the urgency, and Hirschman gives us the attitude, the courage to try things, even when certainty is impossible, and the belief that our actions will open new possibilities and unsuspected opportunities. And today, because I don't want to be purely intellectual, I want to make a very concrete call to action. Because I believe there are 5 things that the philanthropic community needs to do before the refreeze. Now, there are my 5 things. You may have others. These are not cosmetic improvements, but systemic changes that are not only necessary, but maybe for the first time possible. 1, Israel. What is more unfrozen now than Israel? As we heard, for the young people in the previous panel, the war created enormous dislocation, but also extraordinary civic energy. Civil society stepped up, young Israelis took responsibility, but we are already seeing the signs of the refreeze. The unity of the first months that Maor mentioned is fading, all divisions are re-emerging, and let me say something very clearly. If we only rebuild, we will have failed. If we only rebuild, we will have failed. We owe it to these young people to emerge from this moment better and not bitter. Israel needs systemic change in its governance, in its social contract, in its infrastructure, in its public diplomacy. I do not pretend to know exactly what change looks like, but Hirschman reminds us that you discover the possibilities by acting. And the opportunities are not only internal. Israel, despite the trauma, emerges from this war into a completely new Middle East. All dreams of regional cooperation become possible. Have you ever dreamed of having Israel fighting along 6 Arab nations against a common enemy? Have we fully absorbed what that means and what the opportunities that presents for philanthropy? Whatever you're doing to support the rebuilding, and keep doing that, but also consider working with your peers, with people in this room, towards structural reform. 2, Jewish day schools. Right now, we have a unique opportunity to address something that for me is the biggest disgrace of American Jewish life, that in the richest and most prosperous Jewish community in the history of the Jewish people, Jewish day schools remain unaffordable. But now we have tax credits, we have a new interest by funders, and most important, we have a new interest by parents to send their children to Jewish schools. Now, this is a unique opportunity. And a group of funders is already tackling this challenge, and we're proud to host a peer network for day school funders that will meet right after the closing of this conference. So join us, because this is exactly the kind of change that must happen during the unfreeze. 3, and Zoya will like this, politics. Another taboo is breaking here. For decades, funders insisted on staying out of policy. There were legal reasons, of course, but now we realize that many of the issues we care about, anti-Semitism, democracy, poverty, education, cannot be addressed without political engagement. It's understandable, we wanted to keep our hands clean, but now we realize that you cannot protect the things that you care about without entering in the political mud. We are now in a moment of enormous political upheaval. Old norms are being abandoned, and our political system in Israel, in the US, and around the world seems to be moving in very dark directions. We can lament that, or we can get engaged. We must recognize that now, before the political system freezes into something dominated by extremists or anti-Semites, is the time to act. They, the bad guys, are trying to use the unfreeze very skillfully. We must do it too, and we must win. 4, the anti-Semitism ecosystem. Now, I don't want to rehash here the old tired debate about the field of anti-Semitism, but the image speaks for itself. The way our community addresses anti-Semitism is messy, and it's not working the way we would want it. Yes, I said many times that anti-Semitism is not something we can solve, and it's also true that we had some big successes in this fight. But there is fragmentation, there is duplication, there are too many organizations, too many overlapping initiatives, too little research and coordination. But the good news here too is that the mindset is changing. funders are beginning to realize that the system must become smarter and more efficient. You see, in the old freeze, a handful of organizations dominated the field. In the unfreeze, the system exploded, and now we have a fragmented system. We cannot allow the system to refreeze in this dysfunctional reality. Ask yourself a very simple question. Could we achieve the same results with 20% less spending? If the answer is yes, it means that $150 million could be redeployed for other urgent needs. That kind of systemic thinking is what we need in these unfrozen times. 5, finally, I think that one of our priorities has to be the search for Jewish meaning. There's something that I call the ideological unfreezing. Millions of Jews are asking existential questions. Many were searching for meaning before October 7, but after October 7, that search has intensified dramatically. Behind the fear, the anger, the distress lies a deeper question. What is all this for? Now, we have a historical opportunity now to seriously invest in Jewish adult learning, reform rabbinical training, strengthen pluralistic Jewish learning, and bring serious Jewish content into our communal life. In other words, we need to end the model of pediatric Judaism. The idea that Judaism is something that you learn only as a child instead of something that can offer meaning and depth to deal with the challenges of life. We must enact not just an organizational change, but an ideological and educational revolution in Jewish life. But the window is short here too. People are now open to learn, but will they be a year from now? Sometimes I use a meditation app. It's called 10% Happier. Anybody knows it? And it's a great app, by the way. But I often is a metaphor for life for me. I say, you don't have to change everything. If you make things 10% better, dayenu, that's good enough. Now, I think that in unfrozen times, that logic fails. In unfrozen times, we must think big. Unfrozen times are there to be used. My personal regret about COVID as a communal leader is that it was also an unfrozen time, and we didn't take full advantage of it to produce structural change in the Jewish community. This time, the upheaval is even greater, and I believe there are traumas that are so profound that can only be redeemed by big, bold dream. At the beginning of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln didn't have big visions. He simply wanted to restore the old Union. But when he saw the carnage of war, he realized that returning to the old normal would not be enough, and that all the suffering that he was seeing around him could be justified only if America emerged from the war transformed. And so, he called the nation to a higher vision. We are now in a similar moment. Like Lincoln at Gettysburg, we look at the devastation and we ask ourselves, how do we honor the sacrifice? It's like in the final scene of Saving Private Ryan, that Captain Miller tells Ryan, earn this. These young people, the hostages, the Nova survivors, the soldiers, the families in shelter, the Jews that are facing anti-Semitism all around the world, they are asking us the same thing. Earn this. Make all this count. And the way to make it count is by producing positive, transformative change. Lewin tells us now is the moment. And Hirschman reminds us of one of my favorite poems from a Spanish poem called Antonio Machado, Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Traveler, there is no path. The path is made by walking. History is a long chain of surprises. And surprises, especially the ugly ones, are better when we face them together. So let us return to William Odom. He wrote, defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies. Yet, dotted everywhere, heroic points of light flash out. Let each of us be a point of light in the dark stupor of our world. Beleaguered but heroic, rattled but undefeated, afraid but determined. And in the depths of this long winter, let us remember that within us there is an invincible spring. Like the Lion of Judah, let us roar under the sun, proclaiming to the world that Am Israel Chai. Thank you. And thank you. And now that I have your attention, I want to share with you that today we are announcing a new initiative together with the Genesis Prize Foundation. When Gal Gadot received the 2026 Genesis Prize, she dedicated the $1 million award to organizations helping Israelis recover from the trauma of October 7 and the wars that followed. Rather than simply distributing the funds, the Genesis Prize Foundation partnered with us, with the JFN, to turn that gift into a catalyst for greater action. Through a new matching grant initiative, that $1 million will be matched by JFN members and other funders, doubling the investment in the therapists, educators, social workers, and community leaders helping Israeli society heal. In a few moments, you will receive a notification in your email and in the conference app, ping, with more information about this grant. Please take a moment to review it. There's a beautiful video there that I encourage everybody to watch. Share it with your colleagues and partners who may want to participate, and consider how you may expand this effort. This matching grant will enable us to mobilize more giving. It will strengthen the infrastructure that sustains resilience, and it will remind us that in moments like this, collaboration multiplies what any of us could do alone. This is exactly the kind of action that unfrozen times demands. Thank you.